My girlfriend said I had no ambition. After I paid off her debt, I took a remote job abroad and watched her cry on Facetime months later. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and for most of my life, I believed love meant stepping up whenever someone needed you. That was the rule I lived by, the unspoken contract I signed the day Jenna and I started dating. I've always been the responsible one, working extra hours, budgeting every paycheck, and quietly saving so I could cover emergencies without anyone having to stress. When Jenna first mentioned her student loans, I didn't hesitate. She laughed nervously, saying, "It's fine, I'll figure it out," but I could see the panic in her eyes. I told myself it didn't matter if I could ease her burden. That was what love was for. Jenna is one of those people who can light up a room just by walking into it. Her laughter is infectious, her smile disarming, and the way she talks to people makes everyone feel special. But beneath all that charm, there's a tension she tries to hide. Late-night calls about credit cards, bills piling up, random, unexpected expenses. She never complained to me directly, but I could hear it in the nervous edge of her voice, and I handled it all, quietly, discreetly, like it was my responsibility to make sure she never felt crushed by it. I even found ways to pay off some of her debt without her noticing, thinking that would make her life and our relationship better. There were small moments that stuck with me, though subtle comments that gnawed at the edges of my confidence. One night, she was scrolling through her phone, giggling at a friend's post about a boyfriend who traveled the world and made 6 figures by 25. She looked at me and joked, "Wish I had a guy like that, huh?" I laughed it off, but the words stung more than I wanted to admit. Was I really not enough? Or did I just not measure up to her vision of ambition? Still, I went to bed that night feeling proud. I felt validated in my efforts, comforted by the belief that love was about sacrifice, about quietly carrying the weight of someone else's burdens. Little did I know, the very generosity that made me feel strong would soon be the thing that left me questioning everything. I never thought paying bills could feel so personal, but with Jenna, it did. Every month, I found myself quietly transferring money for rent, utilities, and even her car installments, without her having to ask. I'd wake up early, make coffee, check my accounts, and ensure everything was covered before she even noticed. She smiled when she realized something was taken care of, thanked me lightly, but there was always a fleeting hesitation in her eyes, like she wasn't used to someone stepping up so completely. Friends started noticing too. They'd ask why I never spent money on myself, why I was always so drained at the end of the month, and I'd brush it off, telling myself that love is about giving, even when it's inconvenient. The truth is, I didn't mind. I liked knowing she could sleep without worrying, knowing that I was the safety net she never had to stress about. But as the months went on, the subtle cracks began to appear. Jenna would make offhand comments at parties, talking about friends with real ambition or boyfriends who dreamed big and traveled. One evening, while we were laughing with her friends, she leaned over and whispered, "Sometimes I wonder if you're content just coasting along." I smiled, hiding the pang that shot through me. Her words weren't outright accusations, but they planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't shake. I told myself I was doing the right thing. That ambition isn't only measured in titles or paychecks, and yet, the insecurity gnawed quietly at the edges of my pride. There were nights I lay awake, replaying small details, her worried expressions, her fleeting complaints about money, the way she'd sometimes glance at her phone and sigh. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things. But deep down, a flicker of worry lingered. Was my devotion unnoticed? Or worse, unappreciated? Still, I pushed it aside. I had a mission: keep her afloat, keep us together, and believe that love meant sacrifice. But the first real tests were already on the horizon, and I had no idea just how much my loyalty would be questioned. It started with small things, little jabs that I almost convinced myself weren't a big deal. One night, Jenna laughed at a friend's story about a boyfriend who had quit his job to start a business abroad. She nudged me playfully and said, "I don't know. I just wish someone had that kind of drive, you know?" I forced a laugh, masking the sting behind a smile, but the words echoed in my head long after. It wasn't just ambition she was questioning, it was me. Every effort, every late-night transfer, every sacrifice I'd made suddenly felt invisible, like my value was measured not in care but in some unattainable standard. I tried to push it down, tell myself she was just joking, But inside, a knot of anxiety had already formed. The undermining became more constant. She'd comment on friends traveling, climbing corporate ladders, buying expensive things, and subtly compare us. Some people just dream bigger, she murmured one afternoon, scrolling through Instagram while I paid one of her credit card bills. I bit back the defensive urge, focusing instead on the quiet satisfaction of knowing she wouldn't have to worry about another payment. But that pride was starting to feel hollow. I realized I couldn't win her approval by sacrifice. Alone it wasn't enough. And yet, I kept doing it, because love, in my mind, demanded it. Even in the moments when she wasn't actively undermining me, I felt the tension. Her nervous energy, the way she fiddled with her phone, whispered to friends about what if he never tries harder. All of it chipped away at my confidence. I questioned whether I'd misread everything, if I'd been blind to the subtle contempt growing beneath her charm. At the same time, I reminded myself why I stayed, because she was kind when it mattered, funny in ways no one else was, and she needed me. Still, the cracks were widening, and I felt the first real tremors of unease. What if the person I loved most didn't respect the life I was building for both of us? The thought lingered in my mind, heavy and uncomfortable. As I tried to fall asleep that night, knowing something was already off balance, it wasn't just me who started noticing the changes. My friends began pointing it out. One evening, over beers, my buddy Liam leaned in and said, "Dude, she's taking advantage of you, isn't she?" I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off, but deep down, a cold pit formed in my stomach. She always had excuses: late bills, unexpected charges, emergencies, and I was there, covering everything silently. But now I realized the pattern wasn't random. They were warnings I'd ignored, the subtle signs piling up like unread messages I didn't want to face. Jenna, for her part, was oblivious to how obvious it was to everyone else. She'd deny ever asking for money, claiming I was imagining things when I hesitated before transferring funds. "I never wanted to burden you," she'd whisper, her eyes wide and sincere, but the contradictions were stark. At parties, she'd joke about my safe, steady job, while subtly praising her friends' boyfriends who were climbing corporate ladders or traveling the world. Each comment, each laugh, stung more than the last. I felt invisible in my efforts, like all the late nights and sacrifices didn't exist in her mind, or worse, they didn't matter. I started questioning everything, replaying moments in my head, the bills I'd paid, the nights I'd stayed up, making sure she didn't stress, the reassurance I gave her about her future. And yet, she treated me like I wasn't enough. The internal conflict gnawed at me, mixing shame with anger. Is this what love is supposed to feel like? I asked myself one sleepless night, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't stop noticing the small signs. A sigh here, a subtle comparison there, the way she'd brush off my hard work with a casual comment about ambition. I wanted to confront her, but a part of me still clung to the belief that love meant patience, that my sacrifices would speak louder than her words. But the cracks were no longer invisible. The unease had settled in my chest, heavy and insistent, and I realized that the person I loved might not ever see me the way I saw her. Something had to give, but I didn't know when or how. Finally, the day came when I cleared every bit of Jenna's debt: student loans, credit cards, everything. I remember staring at the last payment confirmation, feeling this surge of pride, thinking, this is it. She'll finally see how much I've done for her, how much I care. I imagined her face lighting up, maybe hugging me, thanking me with that genuine smile I loved so much. But when I told her, she barely looked up from her phone. "Cool," she muttered, scrolling through some post about a friend's boyfriend who had just landed a six-figure job abroad. Then, with a smirk, she added, "You're safe, predictable. Not really ambitious, though." I froze. My stomach sank, my chest tightened. All the late nights, the extra shifts, the constant stress I'd absorbed to make her life easier, it didn't matter. None of it. I had expected gratitude, maybe some appreciation, but instead, I felt a cold punch of betrayal. I wanted to shout, to cry, to throw something across the room, but I stayed silent. My pride wouldn't let me show how much it hurt, but inside, a storm was raging. Friends who had warned me before came to mind. I realized now they were right. She never respected what I did. I had thought love meant giving everything for someone, but maybe it also meant recognizing when someone only wanted to take The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thick with disbelief and hurt. I looked at her, so cheerful and unconcerned, and I couldn't understand how my devotion had become invisible. For the first time, I questioned whether love was supposed to hurt this much. The thing I'd believed would solidify our bond, the sacrifices I'd made, had only highlighted the gap between us. And yet, in that hurt, a strange clarity emerged. I realized that the life I'd been building for both of us was only mine to protect now. But I had no idea how soon this realization would force me to make the hardest decision of my life. It all came to a head one Friday night. We were at a small dinner with a few of her friends, casual drinks and laughter filling the room. But the moment I opened my mouth, it felt like the air thickened around me. Jenna leaned back, smirking, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I mean, you're sweet, I guess, but sometimes I feel like you're just coasting through life. No real ambition, no fire." Laughter followed, not cruel, but light, playful, and humiliating all at once. I felt my chest tighten, my face flush. Every ounce of confidence I had built over the months collapsed in that instant. I tried to joke it off, force a laugh, but inside I was crumbling. All those bills I covered, all those late nights, all the emotional energy I poured into her, it felt like it had never mattered. My friends glanced at each other, sympathy in their eyes, but no one could erase the sting. I excused myself, stepping outside into the cold night air, and took a shaky breath. The world felt heavier than usual. The laughter behind me now, a distant, mocking echo, sitting on the curb. The city lights blurred through my tears. I questioned everything I had believed about love, about loyalty, about myself. I felt small, powerless, and painfully aware that my sacrifices hadn't earned her respect. They hadn't even earned acknowledgement. Was I just a convenience to her? The thought twisted in my gut, sharper than anything I'd felt before. And in that moment, I knew if I stayed the same, if I kept giving, I would only be breaking myself further. I looked back at the apartment window, at her laughing with her friends, and I realized the person I thought I loved didn't see me at all. A burning clarity set in. I couldn't continue like this. Something had to change. But what, exactly? I had no idea yet. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and racing thoughts. I kept replaying that dinner over and over, the sting of her words echoing in my chest. Something inside me shifted. I realized I couldn't keep living like this, pouring myself into someone who barely noticed me. I started researching remote jobs abroad, not just as a career move, but as a lifeline, a chance to reclaim my own life. Each listing I scrolled through felt like a door opening, a way to finally put space between us, to breathe again without her constant judgment hanging over me. The more I planned, the more my anxiety turned into determination. I kept it quiet. I didn't want to fight, didn't want confrontation. I just wanted out. At night, I'd whisper to myself, "You deserve more than this. You can't let anyone make you feel small." And somewhere between excitement and fear, I began secretly saving, adjusting my schedule, lining up references and applications. I could feel her noticing the change, though she didn't understand it yet. She'd comment on my distant demeanor, text me more frequently, asking, "Are you upset? Did I do something?" I smiled politely, careful not to let her see the storm brewing inside me. There was a strange sense of empowerment in planning my escape, a feeling I hadn't had in months. I began imagining the life I could build on my own terms, mornings without tension, nights without judgment, work that challenged me and rewarded me, freedom from emotional manipulation. At the same time, a pang of guilt lingered. I wasn't heartless. I had loved her deeply, even when she hurt me. But loving myself had become more urgent than loving her, more necessary than any sacrifice. And so, I started laying the foundation for my exit, piece by piece, carefully, deliberately. The distance was coming, both physically and emotionally, and I could already sense that it would shake the very world we'd built together. Little did she know, the boy she had belittled was quietly reclaiming his life, and she would soon realize the cost of her words. The day I left, I felt a mix of fear, relief, and a strange thrill. My bags were packed, my plane ticket in hand, and my heart pounding with the knowledge that I was finally stepping into a life that was truly mine. I told Jenna casually, like it was just another career update. "I got a remote job abroad. I said over coffee one morning, keeping my tone light. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flash of disbelief, and was that hurt? Then she masked it with a half-smile. "Wow, that's ambitious," she said, with a hint of that old sarcasm I knew too well. I nodded, sipping my coffee, letting the words hang between us without explanation. The next weeks were a strange dance. Jenna tried to check in more frequently, texting late at night, asking about my work, my life, even casually commenting about friends' successes. I responded politely, carefully, but I kept the distance. I wasn't cold, I just wasn't letting her pull me back into the storm. Each time she tried, I felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of power I hadn't felt in months. I was finally choosing me, my life, my happiness. The city I moved to was alive with possibilities. Mornings smelled of fresh bread from nearby bakeries. Evenings glimmered with lights bouncing off glass buildings, and the air felt like freedom itself. I started diving into work, learning new skills, meeting colleagues from around the world. Every success, every little win, built me back up, piece by piece. But in the back of my mind, I knew a reckoning was coming. She didn't understand what she had dismissed, didn't realize the consequences of treating me like I was less. I watched her messages come and go, unread, and a quiet, almost cinematic satisfaction settled over me. The stage was set. I had left, but she would feel the impact of her actions soon enough. Life abroad was nothing like I had imagined. It was better. Mornings weren't filled with tension or subtle critiques, just the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of city streets waking up. I woke up on my own terms, worked on projects that challenged me, and for the first time in months, felt my energy returning. The hours I had spent worrying about Jenna, the debts I had quietly covered, the nights I had lost sleep over her future, all of it felt like a weight lifted from my chest. I was thriving, but quietly, carefully. I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. I was proving it to myself every single day. Jenna tried to reach out, at first casually, then more insistently. Her texts were polite, but carried a tension, a curiosity about the life I was building without her. I replied minimally, careful to maintain boundaries. Every time I saw her name light up my phone, a small satisfaction settled over me. She didn't know, couldn't see, how far ahead I was from the person she had belittled. My pride wasn't loud or cruel-lit, was quiet, internal, a private victory that felt sweeter than anything I had experienced before. I noticed things I had missed when I was with Hertha: freedom to make choices, the ability to prioritize myself, and the subtle joys of independence. Coffee shops, local markets, even the way the sun hit the rooftops in the evening, it reminded me that life didn't have to revolve around someone else's opinion. Slowly, I began to rebuild my confidence, layer by layer, without anyone diminishing it. And yet, there was a tension I couldn't shake. Somewhere in the distance, I knew she was noticing the change, feeling the consequences of the person she had treated poorly. I could feel it in the delayed responses, the awkward messages, the faint undertones of regret she couldn't yet voice. I smiled quietly to myself, knowing that the reckoning I had imagined was closer than she realized, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. Months later, I got a Facetime call from Jenna. My heart skipped not with longing, but curiosity and maybe a little satisfaction. She looked different, paler, a little frazzled, and her smile forced. "Hey, how's it going?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. I could see it before she even spoke: the shock, the realization. She had expected me to be stagnant, to still be the same guy she belittled months ago. Instead, I was sitting in a sunlit apartment, my desk covered with plans and achievements, clearly thriving. Her eyes welled up almost instantly. I can't believe how much you've done, how far you've come," she whispered. There was no mockery this time, no jokes about ambition, just pure, raw astonishment and maybe a hint of regret. I stayed quiet, letting her process it all. She started to cry softly, and I watched a strange mix of vindication and peace washing over me. I didn't have to say anything. She was finally seeing the cost of underestimating me, the value she had taken for granted. Her words stumbled out in fragments. I thought you'd never leave or grow." She couldn't finish the sentences, could barely breathe through the emotion. And I realized then that the power had shifted completely. The person who once made me feel small now felt the weight of her actions. I didn't gloat, didn't shout, didn't make her feel worse than she already did. I simply let the moment linger, watching her face, letting the silence do the work that confrontation never could. For the first time in months, I felt entirely free. Free from the manipulation, free from the insults, free from the constant self-doubt she had instilled in me. And yet, even as she cried on the other side of the screen, I knew this wasn't revenge, was justice in its purest form. The consequences of her choices were unfolding naturally, and I had front row seats. After that FaceTime, I didn't hear from Jenna much. She tried a few messages here and there, apologies, questions, awkward small talk, but I didn't respond in detail. I didn't need to. I'd already seen the impact of my absence, the way she realized too late what she had taken for granted. I spent my days focusing on my self-work, new routines, little adventures that reminded me how good life could feel when it wasn't dictated by someone else's criticism. Every success, every small accomplishment, built my confidence back up in a way that no confrontation ever could. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen by myself. I reflected a lot on what had happened, on why I stayed so long, and on what I had learned. Love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. Loyalty doesn't mean tolerating constant criticism. Respect is earned, not assumed, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. Friends noticed the change in me. They commented on my calm energy, my lighter mood, the way I held my head differently. It was subtle, but it mattered. I realized that my peace, my empowerment, and my boundaries were far more valuable than any relationship built on ungratefulness. I even thought about Jenna, occasionally, not with anger, but with clarity. I understood her flaws, the way her upbringing and insecurities had shaped her behavior. But I no longer felt responsible for her happiness or her perception of me. My life was mine to build, mine to enjoy, without her shadows looming over it. That sense of ownership, that quiet pride, was a feeling I had never truly known before. And as I sat back on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky, I knew something vital had changed. I wasn't the same person who had paid off someone else's debts, hoping for validation. I was stronger, wiser, and free. But the final test, the ultimate confirmation of everything I had learned, was still ahead. I could feel it coming, and I was ready. I officially closed that chapter of my life the day I deleted Jenna's contact from my phone. It wasn't dramatic, no confrontation, no shouting match, just a quiet, deliberate act of reclaiming my peace. I felt a weight lift immediately, as if every ounce of frustration, every sleepless night, every insult had finally been released. My mornings were mine again, my nights peaceful, my mind clear. I focused on work, hobbies, and friendships I had neglected while trying to uphold a relationship that never respected me. For the first time, I felt the kind of freedom that comes from boundaries, from knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Sometimes I thought about what might have happened if I'd stayed, if I'd kept sacrificing, hoping for validation that never came. It made me shiver. I realized that walking away was not just an act of self-preservation, it was empowerment. I was no longer tethered to someone else's insecurities or dismissive words. I could love again, but this time on my own terms, without compromise to my dignity or peace. And somewhere deep down, that knowledge felt sweeter than any thank you I'd ever wanted. Months later, I finally allowed myself a little reflection. I thought about the moments of doubt, the nights I cried alone, the sting of her words, the whole journey. And I smiled, not because of revenge, but because I had survived it, learned from it, and emerged stronger. I was free from manipulation, free from belittlement, and fully capable of choosing happiness on my own. I had turned heartbreak into clarity, betrayal into empowerment, and patience into a life I was proud of. Looking back, I understood the lesson perfectly. Sometimes the quietest, smartest move isn't confrontation. Walking away, building yourself, and letting the consequences unfold naturally. I was finally the person I wanted to be, and nothing or no one could take that away.